Hello there, you're watching All 24 News World News Programme. I'm Kirfa Zachary, your host for tonight, and these are the top stories. Dozens killed in occupation attacks on Gaza City and Khan Yunis, while the UN warns of famine after food runs out. Coming up next, Moroccan protesters take to the streets denouncing corruption, economic hardship, and their government's normalization, calling it complicity in Gaza war a genocide. Also ahead, the IMF confirms Algeria is now the third largest economy in Africa, as Algiers warns that a global trade war will devastate the world's poorest nations. And Sudan's RSF intensifies attacks, shelling Al-Fashir and killing civilians, while the army retakes an Omdurman base. Stay with us, full reports are straight ahead. Welcome back to the program. It's great to have you with us tonight. Breaking in our program, Gaza officials report at least 40 Palestinians killed in relentless Zionist bombardment across Gaza Strip. The deadliest strikes hit Gaza City, where 20 died under heavy shelling, including 13 in a Tufah neighborhood, half of them children. Further south, 11 perished in Khan Yunis, while 8 more died when strikes hit displacement tents in Hamad. Central Gaza also saw 12 fatalities, including 4 children at a refugee camp. Rescue teams continue pulling bodies from rubble as the death toll climbs, marking one of the bloodiest nights in recent weeks. Meanwhile, the Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza announced Sunday that hospitals received the bodies of 51 martyrs and 115 wounded in the latest Zionist attacks over the past day. The ministry stated that the death toll since the renewed war of extermination began on March 18th has risen to 2,151 martyrs, with 5,598 wounded. The total toll from the ongoing Zionist aggression on Gaza now stands at 52,243 martyrs and at least 117,639 wounded. And in another development, the World Food Programme declared Sunday that Gaza's hunger catastrophe has reached a breaking point, with 2 million Palestinians now starving under the occupation, siege, and blockade. In a dire plea on X, the UN agency demanded an immediate aid access as borders remain sealed, condemning man-made famine as food supplies vanish. On a related note, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency UNRWA announced Sunday that its flour supplies in Gaza have been exhausted, raising fears of widespread famine that could impact over 2 million people enduring more than a year and a half of genocide.
Canned peas and carrots, boiled into a thin broth, that's lunch for the Al-Najjar family, displaced and living in the Khan Yunis camp. A plate of rice and a pot of watery stew, the only meal of the day for 11 family members, including 6 children. For nearly 2 months now, no humanitarian aid has entered Gaza under the Zionist blockade, leaving over 2 million people trapped in famine-like conditions, surviving thanks to Solidarity Kitchens.
We live on pasta, peas, rice or lentils, nothing else. My husband and I both have cancer. I stopped taking my medication and the disease is spreading. We've forgotten the taste of meat, forgotten chicken. I'm afraid something will happen to my grandchildren because of the lack of food.
Everyone is suffering, especially the children. Hours spent lining up for a handful of rice or beans, often going home empty-handed.
Everyone is suffering from malnutrition, especially the children. They spend all day queuing for a ration, and sometimes there is none left. We can't even save food because of the heat. We have nothing to offer our children.
In Khan Yunis markets, the story is the same. Stores either empty or filled with overpriced, spoiled goods. Meat, milk, cheese and fruits have vanished. Tomatoes now cost up to $14 per kilo, a price unimaginable before the genocide. The blockade, combined with the destruction of farmland and the collapse of agricultural production, has pushed basic food items out of reach.
The coming days in Gaza are going to be critical. Today, people are not surviving in Gaza. Those that aren't being killed with bombs and bullets are slowly dying. People here are being suffocated. What we see around us is endless suffering under a total and complete blockade.
Since March the 2nd, Gaza's 2.3 million residents have been cut off from all supplies. Food reserves, once built up during a temporary ceasefire, have now run dry. Human rights groups warn that the blockade is not just a collective punishment, it's a starvation tactic, a war crime under international law. As hunger tightens its grip and desperation grows, Gaza teeters dangerously on the edge of a Zionist-made catastrophe.
In the meantime, Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman Al Thani stated that Gaza ceasefire negotiations have seen progress. During a joint press conference with Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan, he reiterated Qatar's rejection of starving the Palestinian people or using starvation as a weapon.
We have noticed on Thursday is a bit of progress compared to the other meetings, yet we need to find an answer for the ultimate question: how to end this war. That's basically, I think, the key point of the entire negotiations. Hamas are ready to give all the hostages back in exchange of number of prisoners, but with conditions that probably Israel not accepting, and Israel focusing on the hostages without a clear end for the war. So when you don't have like a common objective, a common goal between the parties, I believe the opportunities become very thin. But we are trying to push, and do our best.
Elsewhere in occupied Palestine, occupation forces arrested at least 18 Palestinians in overnight raids across the occupied West Bank, with operations reported in Ramallah, Al-Khalil, Jenin, and occupied Al-Quds. Palestinian sources say troops escorted armed settlers into Al-Khalil's old city, imposing a lockdown that barred Palestinian residents. In Dura, soldiers seized surveillance cameras and forced businesses closed during a raid involving heavy gunfire. The most dramatic scenes unfolded in Jenin, where families were forcibly displaced from a Zahra neighborhood as military operations expanded. Now moving on to Lebanon, according to the Lebanese Ministry of Health, an occupation drone strike on the border town of Halta in Nabatea killed a Lebanese farmer working his land. The attack targeted the area between Halta and Wadi Kansa in southern Lebanon, marking another violation of the ceasefire agreement. Zionist drones continue breaching Lebanese sovereignty, flying at low altitudes over Nabatea and the central Bekaa Valley. Elsewhere in the Middle East, medical sources from the Yemeni Houthi group reported that 2 people were killed and 10 others, including women and children, were injured in U.S. airstrikes on Sana'a late Saturday into Sunday. Local media shared that the strikes targeted civilian areas in the city. Houthi military spokesman Yahya Saree also said they hit a military base in southern occupied Palestinian territories with a hypersonic missile, claiming the operation was successful. He added that military support for Palestine will continue until the aggression on Gaza ends and the siege is lifted.
The missile force of the Yemeni armed forces carried out a significant military operation targeting a vital location of the Zionist enemy in the occupied Haifa area with a hypersonic ballistic missile.
Shifting focus to Morocco now, Moroccan labor unions are gearing up for major protests this International Workers' Day, May 1st, denouncing what they call government policies that perpetuate poverty and corruption. The influential Democratic Confederation of Labor is mobilizing workers for a mass march in Ouarzazate, demanding better living conditions, social justice, and expanded freedoms.
The Democratic Confederation of Labor will commemorate this year's International Workers' Day on May 1st under the slogan "No legitimacy for laws and plans that perpetuate corruption, undermine freedoms and achievements, and exploit crises." We therefore call on you to attend and actively participate in the May 1st march, which will depart from the union headquarters in the Castor neighborhood of Ouarzazate at 10 a.m.
In a similar context, Moroccan activists are escalating their condemnation of Rabat's diplomatic ties with the occupying Israel, calling it complicity in Gaza's war. At a human rights forum in Tiflat, Aziz Hanawi of the Anti-Normalization Observatory accused the government of direct participation in Palestinian extermination by facilitating shipments to the entity.
Normalization has gone beyond mere diplomatic relations to the possibility of partnership in a war of extermination through the hosting of ships loading and updating shipments and transferring weapons from the United States to rest and resupply stations in Tangier and Casablanca before being sent to Haifa and other Zionist military ports to fuel the war of extermination. Therefore, we are protesting against the government and have taken a clear stance. From December 2024 until April 2025, the Honorable Minister of Foreign Affairs has failed to respond to Parliament, exceeding the legal deadline. What does this imply? It implies the presence of these ships.
Still with regional developments, Venezuela is reaffirming its support for Western Sahara's independence movement, with Foreign Minister Iván Gil Pinto pledging to boost ties with the newly appointed Sahrawi diplomat Mohammad Islam Basit. In a congratulatory message, Pinto vowed to advance what he called the Sahrawi people's just struggle, promising closer cooperation on development and political priorities.
We trust that your leadership will promote the strategic causes of your brave people. In line with the vision of His Excellency President Brahim Ghali, we renew on this occasion our commitment to accompany the just struggle of the Sahrawi people, as expressed by Commander Hugo Chavez and confirmed by President Maduro today. The issue of the Sahrawi people is also a Bolivian issue.
In our economy news, Algeria is now ranked among Africa's top 3 economies according to a new IMF report applauding the country's economic reforms. The fund highlights Algeria's successful diversification efforts, expanding its production base beyond oil and gas to stimulate growth. Let's get more details with Zahra Farjani in this report.
Amid a global economy weighed down by uncertainty, market instability and slow growth, Algeria is defying the broader global trend, standing out with a strong and steady economic performance, according to the latest assessment by the International Monetary Fund. The IMF highlighted Algeria's significant progress on the African economic map, now ranking as the continent's 3rd largest economy in terms of gross domestic product. The IMF attributed this impressive rise to structural reforms targeting the country's productive base and investment climate. These reforms have enabled Algeria in a relatively short time to surpass Nigeria, securing a position among Africa's top 3 economies with a GDP exceeding $268 billion in the current year. In terms of numbers, the IMF forecasts that Algeria's economy will grow by 3.5% in 2025, an increase of 0.5 percentage points compared to last year's growth rate. These encouraging indicators reflect growing confidence from international financial institutions in Algeria's ability to achieve balanced and sustainable economic growth. This momentum is underpinned by a continued push for economic reforms aimed at diversifying income sources and reducing reliance on hydrocarbons.
In another story, speaking for Middle Eastern and North African nations at IMF meetings in Washington, Salahuddin Talib, Algeria's central bank governor, said the multilateral trading system risks collapse after decades of progress, that is. He called on the IMF to aggressively defend free trade and expand its role as protectionism and economic instability rise worldwide.
In this global context of high uncertainty and increased risks, we hope that the fund will continue to play its pivotal role as a staunch defender of free trade and outspoken supporter of the principle of multilateralism. At a time when the global economy was heading for a soft landing after the recent crises with global inflation declining, all of these developments are now at risk, and the multilateral system that we have built and nurtured for decades is unraveling at a pace that was unimaginable just a few months ago.
In the same context, Salahuddin Talib also cautioned that escalating trade tensions would hit regional economies hardest, particularly debt-dependent nations already facing financial strain.
The elevated and unprecedented levels of policy-related uncertainty, along with the sudden and drastic reshaping of the global trade system and capital flows, have resulted from broad trade restrictions and countermeasures imposed by major economies that have long been the main drivers of global growth. There are no winners in the negative-sum competition of the current trade war, which is deepening global geoeconomic and geopolitical divides.
And in another Algeria-related news, speaking at the Arab States Broadcasting Union's annual meetings, Communications Minister Mohamed Mizyan urged members to wield media as a shield for sovereignty, warning against biased coverage that sows discord in the region, threatening the stability and sovereignty of member states.
إن الحديث عن المضامين الإعلامية.
Talking about media content means referring to biased media, to which many Arab countries are exposed. Media that distort facts and question decisions and orientations adopted, with the aim of sowing discord and undermining the stability of Arab nations. Today, we are all called upon to mobilize the media in our countries to confront these challenges that threaten the stability of the Arab world and harm its sovereignty.
وتمس سيادتها.
And in another story, Algeria's top diplomat welcomed a wave of new ambassadors to Algiers as four nations presented their credentials. Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf received envoys from Guinea, Zambia, Estonia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina in separate ceremonies at the ministry's headquarters, marking the start of their diplomatic missions. Elsewhere in Sudan, artillery strikes by the Rapid Support Forces killed 7 civilians from a single family in El Fasher overnight, with 7 more wounded. Sudanese military sources confirmed that the dead include a woman and a medical worker as the besieged city of North Darfur endures relentless violence. In another escalation, Rapid Support Forces drones struck the Berber power station in River Nile State, the 5th such attack on energy infrastructure in northern Sudan, following 4 previous strikes on Atbara station that plunged multiple states into darkness. Meanwhile, the Sudanese army announced a tactical victory, releasing footage of captured RSF weapons and vehicles after seizing Qanat camp in western Omdurman. Military sources describe this as the RSF's last stronghold in Khartoum's largest urban area. Still in Sudan, medical groups have documented what they describe as the conflict's worst atrocity, the killing of 31 civilians, including children, by Rapid Support Forces in a Salha, south of Omdurman. The Sudanese Doctors Network condemned Sunday's massacres as a war crime, demanding international action against RSF leader Dagalo's forces for systematic attacks on unarmed civilians in the occupied areas. In other topical news story, cross-border firing has flared again between Indian and Pakistani troops along the disputed Kashmir frontier, the third such escalation since last week's deadly attack, killing 26 civilians in Indian administered territory. Indian military officials reported Sunday that Pakistani forces opened small arms fire overnight in the Tumari Gali and Rampur sectors, though no casualties were confirmed in the latest exchange. To other topical developments, but this time in Europe, Ukrainian officials reported at least 5 civilians killed in Russia's latest overnight drone barrage, while claiming their air defenses intercepted 57 of the 149 launched drones. Moscow countered by announcing the destruction of 124 Ukrainian drones and advanced Western-supplied weapons in the past day, including a GDAM bomb and HIMARS missiles. In another news story, U.S. President Donald Trump has called for American military and commercial vessels to be exempt from transit fees through the Suez and Panama canals. On his Truth Social platform, Trump claimed the U.S. played a pivotal role in the canal's existence and said he directed Secretary of State Marco Rubio to pursue this urgently.
American military and commercial ships must be allowed to pass freely through Panama and Suez canals. These two canals wouldn't even exist without the United States of America. I've asked Secretary of State Marco Rubio to immediately address this situation and make it historic.
And finally, it's time to catch up on more international news making headlines around the world, but this time with Sofia Kantouri. Let's follow.
The Nigerian army launched a large-scale manhunt after 12 soldiers were killed in a terrorist ambush near Mali border. The attackers disguised as civilian struck an anti-terror patrol north of Squira. Reinforcements forced the assailants to flee toward Mali. South Korea's main liberal opposition party has trapped its former leader, Lee Jae-myung, as presidential candidate in the upcoming June 3rd vote. The Democratic Party said on Sunday that Lee had won nearly 90% of the votes cast during the party's primary that ended Sunday, defeating two competitors. The United States has added 18 countries to its schedule for discussing tariff exemption requests ahead of their implementation in mid-July. According to the Wall Street Journal, the US will host 6 countries per week over 3 weeks in structured timeline to discuss tariff waivers along with other economic and trade issues specific to each country. Algerian Olympic champion Kylian Imour won a gold medal on Sunday in the final stage of the Gymnastics World Cup held in Egypt. The Paris Olympics gold medalist earned her gold in the uneven bars event, scoring 14.533.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, we reach the end of our news program for tonight. From me and the rest of the team, thank you for tuning in. But if you missed any part of this news bulletin or you would like to get more updates, you can always visit our social media platforms. That's it for me and the rest of the team. Thank you.